Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our publishing and coaching services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Molly Moynahan, author of Stone Garden. Molly, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul.
Are you ready to get started?
Absolutely.
All right, question number one. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
I would say that you should believe in what you're doing. You should have some kind of schedule for writing so that nothing gets in the way. Kind of treat it like going to the gym or anything else that's really important to you. Also, to maybe not show things in the early stages to anyone but a really trusted reader, because criticism can be daunting and not always helpful. And also to take a look at what people are reading and possibly think about why a story really, involves so many people, and kind of getting a sense of what an audience would like to. Hopefully you've had that from reading in the past, but sometimes I find that the people that I work with as students, they don't read very much, which is a little odd to me, that if you want to be a writer, you're not reading. So I think reading is really important.
And what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
Well, I'm actually going through that a little bit right now. I had incredible luck and possibly serendipity in all three of my books. I barely was rejected, and I probably shouldn't say that, but I didn't have much experience with rejections on those. On the other hand, I have written other novels that nobody wanted, so there is that. But I am now getting a lot of incredibly flattering, very kind rejections on this memoir I've written, and it's oddly more difficult in some ways to hear how much somebody liked your work, and then to hear that they can't, they don't think they can sell it because the market doesn't need more memoirs, or you're not famous enough, or whatever it is. So I would say that not getting any, being told that what you've done is really good, but they were not going to buy it, that's really hard, because it doesn't give you anything to do. You just kind of have to accept the compliment and move on.
And then with your books, most of your books, you went through a traditional publisher, is that correct?
Yeah, the first three, I've actually written, keep adding books to this. I have a self-published book on writing college admission essays. So that one, we put it on Amazon, and we had it self-published. But otherwise, the other three, yes. Harper & Row, Phantom Transworld, and then HarperCollins.
Pretty good lineup.
Not bad. No, I'm very lucky. They're great publishers.
And your other three books, were they fiction?
The first two novels, yeah. The first two novels were fiction. Obviously, they're novels. And then Stone Garden. And then the book on college essay writing is a writing book, really, more than anything else.
Well, let's talk about the marketing side, since you've gone both routes. You've gone traditional and you've gone sell. So please share a marketing strategy that you've used in your book launches that has worked well.
Absolutely. So when I was published by brick and mortar publishers, large ones with at that time pretty good budgets, some of the marketing strategies was done for me. They arranged readings, they arranged interviews. I had a smallish tour with the third novel, mostly through the Midwest, but it was fun. It was really fun. So one of the things that happened is that teenagers really loved my book, and so we targeted some of the teenager audience, and then also they had me write a letter to librarians to kind of encourage, libraries buying the book, but also librarians talking about it and recommending it to their readers, and that worked really well. I also pitched pieces. I tried to keep writing nonfiction things for various. A lot of the magazines have disappeared, but the first novel, I had a short story published in Mademoiselle magazine, and that was nice, and it sort of got people excited. Actually, it was the second novel. It was the first chapter of the second novel. Mademoiselle sadly doesn't exist anymore, but so I tried to get my name out there as much as possible. I also have a blog, which is more personal narrative. So basically just sort of keeping my name. I wrote for the Huffington Post. Any chance I had for appearing in front of groups. I was here in Chicago. I've done some events I did an event with Sarah Paretsky, where she was the main speaker, but I was the first one, so that was great. And I visited a lot of book groups. I still visit book groups sometimes because people still are reading my novel. So that's helpful. They're your readers, and it gets buzz.
Well, you brought up a lot of great points with that. So I do want to take a little bit more of a deep dive into some of those areas. What I would like to ask
Sure.
you, you mentioned your publisher arranged a media tour. So how did that work?
Yeah, well, it was a mix. It was fun. It was a lot of fun. So for Stone Garden, I actually appeared on a cable TV show in Delaware. I'm not sure why it was Delaware, but it was. And I appeared between a goat and a cooking segment. And he did a really extensive interview and he had clearly maybe he hadn't read the novel completely cover to cover, but he knew what it was about. He knew what the themes were. He was a very good interviewer, the person who did that. So there was that. Had interviews with the major newspapers. Again, a lot of these things have changed. Like the newspapers aren't doing these big, such large, articles about writers the way they used to. I was lucky enough to get a New York Times book review in the Sunday Times, and that for Stone Garden, and that was a very positive review, and that got me quite a lot of attention. Let me think, what else did I do? Radio. I had I can't remember, I'm sorry, I can't remember the show, but there was a radio show in California that I was on. And yeah, that's probably, the thing with the marketing departments, and again, a lot of things have changed. They sort of do a big push at the beginning, and then they, unless you're a bestseller novel, person, and I haven't been a bestseller, but they did invest quite a bit of money in me for the third novel. So the marketing people were very, very active at the beginning. I would say for the first 6 months. Then it starts to fade out a little bit. You probably heard that. So I tried to pick up the slack, and I picked up the slack. I had no problem. I really enjoyed speaking in front of people, going and seeing school groups. So I did all that kind of thing. And since it was so big with teenagers, and I taught high school as well as college, I was pretty good at speaking to that audience.
Now, which publisher did you use for Stone Garden?
Stone Garden was HarperCollins.
Yeah, the reason I asked that, typically HarperCollins and Penguin are typically the only two major publishers that really arrange them to help with the marketing, with going on the tours and everything. So when you mentioned that, definitely want to get some more detail, because it's very few publishers that actually will make that investment and make that, that will support you when you're going out there and doing those tours. And it sounded like you had a great experience.
It was really fun. It was, not to discourage anybody, but sometimes, you'd be in a bookstore and there would be 4 or 5 people there, or maybe less. And then there were some occasions where I was appearing in front of hundreds. So, you really had to be prepared and sort of see yourself, in a positive light, no matter who had shown up to listen. It was great. And I went all over Wisconsin. I spoke in front of about 4 school groups, teenagers who'd all read the book I think it was in Reading, Pennsylvania. So it was kind of a real mix of people. And I think being willing, I took the train all the way out to this little town, and this whole really large established book group took me out to dinner. And that was from my publisher, because they had been persistent, saying, can she come and talk to us? And it was lovely. It was really lovely. There's the side of the whole experience where you also get to meet people who tell you that your writing has inspired them or made them cry or laugh or whatever. And that part of it, with the marketing, it's kind of the most rewarding part in many ways.
Yeah, I agree completely. Some of the nicest things I've ever received from readers were when they actually would send me a message, a Facebook message, or even an email, and telling me, hey, I changed my life because of your book. And I'm like, wow, that's like the greatest.
Yeah.
I would take the over royalty check any day of the week, because that was such an impact.
I agree. And what else happened to me is I had an older fan. My book is, the main character in Stone Garden is a young woman. She's in high school. She's about to graduate. And this was a guy who was probably in his 70s. And he wrote to me and said that he could feel everything the narrator felt. And I have to admit, I was a little shocked. It was sort of like, I had no idea that I would have someone, different, not that men didn't like the book, but, it seems kind of, he wasn't who I was thinking of. And when I got that, I thought, you know what, you need to just pay attention to what your own process,
Absolutely.
So that was really touching, though, too. Yeah. It's been a good journey. I mean, it can sometimes be discouraging, but it's been good.
Well, how did the book groups work? Because that's another innovative strategy as well.
Yeah, well, I'm not, again, I don't want to keep making it sound like all these things have ended, but I think book groups were a little more active when publishing was, publishers really made an effort to get in touch with established book groups. And so there was one big, I live in Chicago, which, you might have said, there was a very established book group in Evanston that, had read the book, had extensive notes. They went through there were 2 different ways. One was just a friend, like I'd be at a gym or something, and they'd say, oh, can you we want to read your book. Can you come and see us in a month or something? And then that would be kind of an informal thing. But it was great because it was 10 people and they'd all bought the book most of the time. Sometimes they had library copies. I tried not to frown. But, otherwise sometimes Harper Collins had been in touch with a big book group and asked them if they would like to do, to have me come. And that was really great.
Well,
and you want to know what you do at a book group? Is that
no, what I was
your
asking,
question?
mainly just for strategies to be able to reach out. So for readers
Oh,
that
how
might
to
not be,
get there.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I think there's a blog. There's also, because I haven't had a book published in a while, I haven't been paying as much attention as it should be. But there's a blog. There's a lot of bloggers. Obviously, things like Goodreads, the really big sites are great, and Amazon. But there's also a lot of bloggers that have quite a few following, and I would suggest that you find out who they are and then send them a note saying, I'd love to send you a copy of my book, and I'd love to do an interview, just kind of offer yourself up to them to review your book, because they can bring in a lot of readers.
Well, one more thing I'd like to touch on before we go to our next question, and that was, you also mentioned about reaching out to librarians to promote your book. So what's the process with that?
Well, I won something. I'm not good at gathering up all my information. So it was Library Journal really liked the novel, and then I won something Best Teen Read kind of thing. And I think that was I'm sorry, that's a train. That's probably not good audio for you. I think that was a Library Journal. I think I think they sponsored Best Teen Read. So the libraries were sort of involved. I mean, the thing about librarians is most of the time they're just the most enthusiastic readers, and they love, helping writers do better, and they love having readers discover your books. So especially in the teen, so if you have a certain market, like my book was not a YA, but since it had a young narrator, and it was kind of like contemporary teenage life, it had quite a, there were a lot of teenagers loved it. So, so that, I think that was the main way that it happened. And then my publisher, I believe, got in touch with me and said, can you write a letter to the librarians about what the library means to you? So I think I'd written some short piece about that, and then also talk a little bit about your book. And so they must have made the contact on that. So that was great, because I love librarians and libraries.
Well, and this is going to transition nicely to our next question, because now I want to ask about your favorite book. So what is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
Oh, that was such a hard one. I kept going back and forth between like Moby Dick and so the book that I read in college that really just woke me up to so many things was a novel by a French writer, Zola, called Germinal. And I guess one of the main things that happened was that my father was a novelist and a literary critic, so I was exposed to lots and lots of literature as a child and stuff. But I don't think I'd ever read anything that affected me so much emotionally. It was about these French miners, and it was about poverty, and it was about love, and it sort of blew my mind, to put it. And what did I love about it? I think what it taught me was that you should never blink, go right to the jugular, go there, write about grief, write about happiness, write about love and loss, and, make your reader pay attention by using the strongest words and the best prose possible, and try not to chicken out, So I think, Zola, I think is 18th century, maybe 19th century. Yeah, I think it was 1850, something like that, right after the French Revolution, when things were getting kind of bad in France. So yeah, this book, Germinal, I went to my teacher who had assigned it. He was a history teacher, and I said that I wanted to give away all my possessions, and I was young, and he basically said, "No, it's okay. You should just relax." But yeah, so I think that's the book that stayed with me. That and can I say another one?
Sure.
Another one, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, the other one that really, and I think it's because my father was also a D.H. Lawrence scholar, was Women in Love. Kind of along the similar lines, which is that Lawrence is criticized sometimes for being kind of too extreme in his descriptions and over the top, but I just loved that. I just loved his ability to just go completely to the core of feelings. So I think both of those novels really helped me see myself as what I'd like to do as a writer.
And for a final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
Oh, so yes. Look, Stephen King, I think his book is called On Writing. I believe so. It's a really good book. And he said, I haven't read very many Stephen King novels because they scare me too badly, but his book on writing is actually very strong. And so it's very straightforward. What he said was, if you want to be a writer, you must do two things above all others: read a lot and write a lot. There's no way around these two things that I'm aware of, no shortcuts. And that was Stephen King.
Well, I would say, why is that your favorite quote? But I think that's pretty clear.
Yeah. I mean, it's very simple, and I think it's also very non-elitist. He's not saying, you have to take all these classes. I mean, that can help, but he's being really true, and that's how I believe that's how I mean, he's got a pretty interesting he's got a very interesting background. So I like that because it's also, takes the mysticism away, but a lot of people don't want to write and read a lot. They just want to get published, and that isn't really how it happens, I don't think, most of the time. That's my two cents on that.
Well, Molly, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
Oh, I have a website. It's the address is www, and then it's just mollymoynahan.com. And you will come to my website, which we definitely need to update. There's a bunch of things on there. All my books are on there and some other things. I think my blog is on there, too.
Well, Molly, thank you again for being a guest on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
You too, Paul. Thank you for asking.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how to get your book published with a proven system that works, grab a free copy of my book at getpublishedpodcast.com.